right, we left off with the decisive defeat of the Prince Bishop at the hands of the Anabaptists on May 22nd. And we're going to go right into a plot set by the Anabaptists to assassinate the Prince Bishop. And of course, why not? Why wouldn't they do something so audacious as attempting to cut the serpent's head off right after this overwhelming victory? I mean, the Anabaptists at this point are drunk almost on the idea that God favors them and they're almost invincible. And there's a specific woman named Hill Fakin, who comes up with an idea, and it's inspired from a story of how to assassinate the Prince Bishop. And it's going to include seduction and information that's going to get her close to the Prince Bishop for her to assassinate him. And she's inspired by this particular story, and she devises this plan and then pitches this plan to both Nipperdalling and Jan of Leyden. And she wanted to see what they thought about this plan. And here it was in a nutshell. Hill's plan was to have herself leave the walls of Munster and be captured by the Prince Bishop's men. And of course, they would interrogate her. She would tell a desperate story of her escaping a mad city. Her husband was killed. She was under the threat of death, and she just barely escaped with her life. And not only that, but she would have information on how to breach the walls of Munster and end the siege quickly. And of course, that would be some tempting information given just what happened to the Prince Bishop not long ago. And she would bring with her a very fine linen shirt. And this shirt would be a gift of good faith on the part of Hill. And she would offer this shirt to the Prince Bishop. Well, that sounds all well and good. Well, how is she going to kill the Prince Bishop? Well, the shirt that she was going to bring with her has actually been dipped in poison. And before that, even before dipping the shirt in poison, the shirt was looted from the body of a leper. So this was a shirt you didn't want to touch. Actually, there's no documentation of how Hill carried this shirt with her when she did this plot, but needless to say, it was not close to her at any time. So she pitches this plan to Nipperdalling and Leyden, and they agree with this. They think it's an intriguing idea. They don't think it's going to work. It's a long shot in their mind, but honestly, they don't really care because it's a win-win for them. It's a win-win for Leyden and Nipperdalling. Two things could happen. One, she could actually succeed and assassinate the Prince Bishop, which would be obviously the best case scenario. The army would fall apart and the citizens of Munster could break out. The other option would be that she fails and she's killed. And that's okay too, because then she's just a martyr and she can add to the religious fervor deposit box in Munster and just fire up the people even more. So in Leyden and Nipperdalling's mind, this is a win-win situation. So soon after the pitch, Hill enacts the plan. So she leaves Munster and she is captured by the Prince Bishop's men as planned. And she, instead of being brought straight to the Prince Bishop, she's brought to his high bailiff. And he interrogates her, asking her questions that anyone that's interrogating a deserter would ask. What's your background? How did you escape? Who are you? What do you want? Stuff like that. And as the bailiff is interrogating her, she pitches this story to the bailiff of being a widow and barely escaping with her life. And of course, what really intrigued the high bailiff was this idea that she had information on how to get troops inside of Munster. And she must have done really well in her acting, because she convinces the high bailiff that she does need to see the Prince Bishop in person. Prince Bishop wasn't actually in the camp of the siege at the time. He was somewhere else. So she was going to be transported the next day to go see the Prince Bishop. And along with having this vital information about how to get troops into Munster, Hill was a very beautiful woman as well. And in the story that inspires her, the woman is beautiful in that story that she's inspired by to do this assassination plot. So she's going to use both the information and her beauty to get her close to Prince Bishop and assassinate him. And the plan might have worked. Everything was going exactly as they wanted. She was going to go see him, and it may have come to fruition if it wasn't for another man who is actually seeking asylum ends up in the Prince Bishop's camp, and that man is Herman Rammert. And like I said, Herman Rammert actually wanted asylum from Munster. His life was actually in danger. And not only that, but he actually knew the details of Hill's plot to kill the Prince Bishop, so he had leverage to actually get asylum and not just show up and then get killed because he's just some deserter. So he tells the High Bailiff of this plan by Hill to assassinate the Prince Bishop. Well, as you can imagine, Hill is immediately arrested, and she is brutally tortured. She's put on the wheel, and she is tortured until she admits to this plan to kill the Prince Bishop, which she eventually does. There's some tense dialogue between her and the bailiff, or her executioner, as she is admitting to the plot. And in the end, the executioner beheads her as she is on the wheel. And for Herman Rammert's actions, for his giving up of the plot here, he's actually given his freedom. And not only that, but he left his family in Munster. So he escaped, sought asylum, and was begging for the protection of his family. And the High Bailiff promised that his family would be spared once the Prince Bishop fell the city. So that was Herman Rammert's reward. And that is in a nutshell. There's a lot more details into this plot, which are very intriguing. And I actually encourage you, if anyone's interested in more details of the plot, you can look up the plot, and there's many documents on Hill's plot. So Taylor King has a really good explanation. Even some of the eyewitnesses, Crescent Brooks' account, and Gresbeck's account as well. So that's the failed plot to assassinate the Prince Bishop.
The Lion of Judah, who conquered the grave. He's David's root and the Lamb who died to ransom the slave.
All right, we're going to switch gears here and look at a direct assault on the institution of marriage by Bernard Rothman. Before we do, I want to make this statement. All Christians are going to have a correct scriptural sexual ethic. And what do I mean by that? Well, we're going to understand what the institution of marriage is, who it's between, a man and a woman, what the purpose is in a marriage. It is to be fruitful and multiply as God commands his image bearers to be, in the production of covenant children who will therefore do as we have done later as they grow up and have children themselves. And as they expand, they subdue the earth. And it's a very clear sexual ethic. While we consummate the marriage, God is the one that actually gives life, and he opens and closes the womb. There is a easy dividing line to see between a scriptural sexual ethic that is decreed by God and a man-centered or a man-decreed sexual ethic that is solely there to fulfill men's lusts. And because of that dividing line, it's going to be very easy to see Bernard Rothman's assault on the institution of marriage. And people in Munster are also going to see this dividing line. And it's inevitably going to lead some in Munster to rebel. And not just by words and thoughts and ideas, but actual physical, violent rebellion because of this attack on the institution of marriage. In Munster at this point, the ratio of men to women are, for every 3 women, there's only 1 man. So women right now outnumber men in Munster. And it's been like that really since the expulsion, the forced expulsion out of Munster back in February 27th. A lot of women in Munster are single, have never had a spouse, and many are just alone because their husbands were expelled, or some are widows. A lot are widows as well. So Bernard Rothman wants to take all these single women who really have nothing to do, especially after this second assault. I mean, they are doing things, right? They're helping defend the city. I'm not saying that they're busybodies or something. They all have tasks to do, but they don't have any protectors, as Bernard Rothman would say. And many of them who could bear children are not bearing children. So Jane of Leiden and Bernard Rothman decide that they're going to hear a word from God, that God wants every woman inside Munster to be paired with a man. And this will be under the ordinance of marriage. So it will be a protectorate. Every woman will have a protector, but it will also incorporate the conjugal rights as marriage would. And they give this decree knowing that because of the imbalanced ratio, that a man or a husband is going to have multiple wives. So Bernard Rothman is going to do this by buttering up the people and giving them sermons on Genesis about God's decree of being fruitful and multiplying. But he's going to distort that understanding of what being fruitful and multiplying is by allowing polygamy, or men to have multiple wives, and this being blessed by God. And he's going to use examples of David and Abraham and many of the patriarchs in the Old Testament, totally disregarding the original creation account of Adam and Eve being joined together and creating life. But he's going to use these Old Testament stories as justification for this polygamy. So it's officially decreed by Jane of Leiden that all women above the age of 15 must be married. And this age limit is really a guideline. Girls much younger than 15 will eventually be paired with men that could be their great-grandfathers. At least their grandfathers, but some even their great-grandfathers. So initially it's decreed that women under the age of 15 must be married. And Rothman has officially declared war on God's institution of marriage, the sanctity, the ordination, and the purpose of it. And it doesn't just stop with single women. It actually extends out to women who were married under the old evil sacral system. And this is a logical extension of their view of baptism, being that if you are baptized as an infant in a sacral society, this is more of a secular initiation into society as a person. It has nothing to do with your being baptized in a covenant or anything like that. So they're going to extend that to marriage as well. Well, if you're married under this sacral society, then it is merely secular. It is not ordained by God, and therefore it is not valid. So any marriage, anyone that was married in the sacral system has to have it reevaluated and reaccepted by the priests, or the preachers inside of Munster. And even if a woman was already married, so when the preachers were outside of Munster handing out pamphlets from Bernard Rothman and trying to bring people into Munster, those that accepted the call, a lot of times the husbands would send the families first, the wives and the children. They would secure their belongings or sell what they had to sell, or some had sick parents and stayed up there. And they would meet their families, months later. But even women that were in Munster waiting for their husbands, they could not be single. They must be paired with a husband. And you can imagine the shock of you sending your family to Munster, and then you arriving months later only to find that your wife has been paired with another man. And like I said, this isn't just for protection, but the woman must give conjugal rights to whoever they're paired with. And any wife, any disobedience that a wife portrays to their husband, to their new husbands, it doesn't matter if it's against a sinful command from their husband or not. Any disobedience will be punishable by death. And that will be carried out. And most of the death sentences on wives in Munster from this point will be those who don't give conjugal rights to their new husbands. I mentioned that any above the age of 15 must be married, and that was just a guideline. Well, these young girls that were paired with these older men refused to give conjugal rights. And these men would bring them to justice, bring them to Jan of Light and the judge, and they would execute them. If women could not bear children, if the marriage was unfruitful, or it could be dissolved, and the woman would just be assigned to another husband. As you can imagine, this is a clear violation of the ordinance of marriage, something that is so intertwined in the society at the time that this is really starting to cause some disunity. Before this, Munster was pretty much unified against the Prince Bishop, especially after that assault. But this decree has really started to cause some problems, and of course, of course it would. The women in Munster before this decree actually felt like they were equals with men. That they had some individuality. They didn't see themselves under this patriarchy, and now they see a double yoke of being under a patriarchy, but also tools for men who want to satiate their lusts or their sick fantasies to take advantage of this new decree. So it was really starting to cause problems in Munster. Even the preachers, the ones that were given the task to reordinate these old marriages under the sacral system, even these preachers started to see the problems, the deep problem here, and would go to, or they were going to Jan of Light and saying, "Hey, you need to rescind this decree because this is causing some serious problems." There are even people talking that God didn't even reveal this to you, that you are just doing this so you could act on your lustful desires. The preachers actually start using New Testament proof texts to prove their point. This is probably one of the first times since the Munster Rebellion that the New Testament has even been opened. And this horrific attack on the institution of marriage is not going to go unanswered by some in Munster. And now we'll look at Henry Molenheek and his rebellion.
Is he worthy? Is he worthy of all blessing and honor and glory?
So one of the men that is not going to stand for this attack on marriage is a man named Henry Molenheek. Molenheek is the leader of the blacksmith guild in Munster, was a dear friend, a close friend of Herbert Rusher, who was executed for speaking bad about Mathis. Molenheek was a well-respected man inside Munster. He lived there his entire life since he was born. He was known for being able to really fix anything, and actually he is responsible for designing and manufacturing many of the defenses in Munster that the Anabaptists are using against Prince Bishops. Like a lot of the cannons and stuff was a direct result of Molenheek. And actually he is assigned as the chief armorer inside Munster. Now he is a devoted husband. He's a devoted husband and father to his children. And he is a staunch, unmovable believer in God's ordination of marriage as it is described and the Old Testament and the New Testament, God's original purpose for it. But he also is very convinced of the Anabaptist cause. Now he's convinced in the Anabaptist cause because they're attacking the sacral system. They want a free church, right? They want a free city, and Molenheek in principle agrees with that. So he joins the Anabaptists for the sheer principle of a free church, right? But is soon caught up in the insanity of Munster. I mentioned he's a close friend. He was a close friend of Herbert Rusher, and even after Rusher was executed, Molenheek convinces himself that was God's will, and he tries to push that out of his mind. But this imposition of polygamy in Munster, in Molenheek's mind, is now indefensible, and Molenheek has decided to take a stand. He now believes that the leaders in Munster are well outside of God's will and are actually chaotic agents that need to be taken down. So Molenheek recruits other disillusioned citizens, and they plan a coup. They're going to take out the leaders of Munster and see what happens after that. On July 30th, the conspiracy gathers around City Hall, where Leiden, Knipperdolling, and Rothman are having a meeting. There's guards outside of City Hall, but it's not well protected. And that evening, the conspirators, Molenheek and the conspirators, storm City Hall, and they arrest all three men, and they lock them up in the City Hall cellar. And Molenheek kind of barricades themselves, and the conspiracy barricades themselves inside City Hall. And it was a quick, resounding success. They gathered these men up, put them in prison, and they're kind of taken aback, right? Wow, we've captured these guys. It looks like these madmen, their reign is over. We can have whatever happens next. Maybe we can have an actual free church or whatever. But their reign is at an end. And really all Molenheek needs to do at this point is go open a gate for the Prince Bishop and allow the Prince Bishop to come in. Right? It's an easy answer to what to do next. But was it that simple? I mean, Molenheek would need to explain to the Prince Bishop of what he's doing. He doesn't want to be executed along with everybody else. And did he really want the Prince Bishop in there at all? Again, he was a believer in the original principles of Anabaptism and their fight against the oppression of the visible church on Anabaptists in general. So all of these thoughts, like what do we do next? How do we do it? Took the momentum that they had with arresting Knipperdolling, Leiden, and Rothman, and their momentum comes to a screeching halt. Their inaction leads them to not knowing what to do. And this dead time allows the supporters of Leiden, because by now word has reached around Munster that this coup, and of course many people heard it, saw it. A lot of the guards were taken out that were standing guards in front of City Hall. The conspirators took them out. So commotion has risen awareness to what's happening. So supporters of Leiden have regrouped while there's this inaction going on. And a counterattack is staged against the City Hall to free these men. And it's led by Herman Tilbrecht. So Tilbrecht leads around 600 screaming men and women. And they retake the City Hall. And they siege it, right? These anti-conspirators siege City Hall, and eventually Molenheek realizes they're outnumbered and surrounded, and they surrender. Molenheek is taken into custody, and undoubtedly he knows his fate. He knows obviously he saw what happened to Rusher, and Rusher just spoke bad about Mathis. And Molenheek tried to stage a coup. So he obviously knows what his fate is. Jan has Molenheek and some of the co-conspirators drug out into the cathedral square. They're given shovels, and they're ordered to dig their own graves. And Once they dig those graves, they're shot into those open graves. Now, I'd like to pause right here and do some application, because I think this is an important part of the story. Okay, so we know that there are injustices happening from the visible church to the invisible church at this time, and before the Reformation, before Munster. We just have to look at Jan Hus and Ratramnus and Gottschalk. There are injustices happening, right? But it's important to remember that this is not inherent in the church. Injustice is not inherent in the church. That's why there's Reformation, not revolution. When you go to our website, when you go to the Trinity Reformed website, the first thing you see is the phrase, always reforming. It doesn't say always revolutionizing. And what are we reforming to? We're obviously reforming to the Word of God. There is no revolutionizing to the Word of God, okay? There are Christians, and maybe some of you are watching right now, who are like those in Munster, inside the walls of Munster, yelling revolution to the Prince Bishop. And you're aligning yourselves with revolutionary movements like the woke movement in the church or Black Lives Matter. Hey, that sentence, I agree with that. I agree with Black Lives do matter. So I'm gonna support this group who are fighting an injustice that I see. Or maybe you side with the LGBT movement and the injustices that are acted upon LGBT. But you're actually standing in solidarity with the Jan of Leidens of our day. I hope you understand this. Look, was the Prince Bishop a Christian? Probably not. Was he a rich megalomaniac and who really just wanted to further his own selfish gains? Probably. Did he have many mistresses? He certainly did. That's well documented. But who is better for the church? Who is better for the church at this point? The Prince Bishop actually allowed Lutherans and Catholics to coexist together inside Munster. In fact, he was actually sympathetic to the Lutherans. He was sympathetic to the Protestants. Ideas could actually be debated. The gospel could be spread with little hindrance. Reform could be brought to Munster over time with the Prince Bishop in charge. What do the Jan of Leidens want? They want revolution. They want revolution to redefine marriage. What did Bernard Rothman just do? What did we just talk about Bernard Rothman doing? It's a sexual revolution. The Jan of Leidens of today want to redefine gender. Right? They are encouraging the mutilation of prepubescent children if they wake up one morning and decide that they're a different sex. What is justification in a Jan of Leiden? Justification is perpetual reparations. That's how you're justified. How are you sanctified? Well, you're sanctified by virtue signaling. The Jan of Leidens of today also want to allow unabated murder of children. And don't get me wrong, there in Munster itself, in the actual story of Munster, there is infanticide happening, and everyone turns their head away. Well, how is this infanticide happening? Well, once wives are given to men, and they have 4, 5, 6 wives, and these wives are getting impregnated, especially men that originally had just one wife, who now have 5, you're going to have some jealous mothers, and they're gonna kill each other's babies. So there's infanticide happening inside, even in the historic story of Munster. And most of us, hopefully all of us, are listening to this study, right? And we're utterly appalled at the actions of Jan Mathis or the actions of Jan of Leiden or Nipperdalling and Rothman. But here's what I don't understand. We'll gawk at disgust with what we hear and read, But then we turn around and vote for their theological descendants because we hate the Prince Bishop, right? When I mentioned that the spirit of Munster lives, like 2 studies ago, this is what I'm talking about. This isn't us standing above the precipice, looking down at everybody else saying, look, see there, Munster, the spirit of Munster lives. No, it lives among us as well. And this is a prime example. Now, look, some of you are going to be like Molenbeek eventually. Molenbeek went along with the Anabaptist rebellion because he believed in principle of the injustices that the church were bringing upon the people. But eventually, the revolutionaries are going to attack something that you think is foundational. And finally, you're going to decide, maybe I should resist now. But look, it's going to be too late. It's going to be too late, and you're going to be given over to the mob, and you're going to be given a shovel and told to dig your own grave. Let me be clear, and I know look, the main election happened. We're already past that point. There still are elections happening, like in Georgia with the Senate. But there will be elections after this, okay? We should not be, Christians, we should not be voting in Bernard Rothmans or Jan of Leydens because we hate the Prince Bishop and what he stands for. Who will be better for the church? Who will allow the church to be the church and spread the gospel and to bring the message of salvation to God's people so they can be brought into the pasture of Christ? Who will allow that? Jan of Leydens will not allow that. I hope this study has made that perfectly clear. I am utterly baffled when I see Christians cheering for those acting like Jan of Leydens, ushering them in to positions of authority in today's society. I'm truly baffled by that. So I wanted to point that out because the spirit of Munster lives.
And it's Jesus our Messiah, hold forever those he loves.
All right, so the coup is over. Molenbeek is dead. And over the next few days, a majority of the co-conspirators are going to be killed as well. And they're going to do it in gruesome fashion. And they're not going to use muskets. Many of them wanted to just put them out of their misery with muskets, but they were afraid that the Prince Bishop would hear gunfire and assume that there was a counter-revolution going on. So they wanted to kill them quietly, and they did, and it was very brutal. All right, so we're going to go over the second assault on Munster from the Prince Bishop. So after the first humiliating attack, many of the Prince Bishop men deserted. And those who remained were not excited about the idea of attacking again or preparing an attack so quickly after the first one. There was a replenishment of men by leaders and authorities throughout the Holy Roman Empire. Mary of Burgundy gives her support to the Prince Bishop. Anything that he needs, she will provide. And she provides men, as well as other leaders in the area. And preparation for this second assault starts on June 7th. Remember, the first failed attack was May 22nd. So very quickly, another attack is being prepared. And you might have remembered before the first assault that Prince Bishop tried to drain the outer moat. Well, the Anabaptists fill it back up, and there's this back and forth between the Prince Bishop and the Anabaptists trying to drain this moat. And the Prince Bishop's men don't want to attack if they can't easily traverse these obstacles, which obviously makes sense, right? And finally, a solution is brought to the Prince Bishop to allow his men to easily get over the moats. And as is custom, this is usually custom when an army is about to attack a besieged city. As custom, on August 25th, the Prince Bishop allows the Munster to surrender. He gives them 3 days to surrender. And he actually he's feeling generous this time, and he actually gives an extra 3 days for anyone inside Munster that wants to flee. And he pronounces that if anyone wants to flee Munster, that the Prince Bishop will welcome you. You will have your freedom. You will not be harmed. And you can join us in taking back your city. But if you stay past if these 3 days pass and you are inside Munster, your life is forfeit when we take the city. That was the Prince Bishop's deal. They actually shot pamphlets over the walls of Munster with blunt arrows. So they shot these over the wall for the people of Munster to read. And Jan of Leiden decreed that if anyone was found with one of these pamphlets, that they were automatically put to death. Their life was forfeit immediately. So on August 28th, the sun starts to rise, and the day is met with siege cannon raining upon Munster. So this artillery barrage starts again on August 28th. And this time it's focused on a particular point, and it's the St. Myrtise Gate. And St. Myrtise Gate is the point of attack this time, and that's where the soldiers will, after this artillery barrage, scale the walls into Munster. The massive cannon, the Devil, and the smaller one, the Devil's Mother, are pummeling the walls next to the St. Myrtise Gate. The walls are actually being punctured, and it looks like the walls are going to fall. The Anabaptists, of course, are responding by firing their cannons back at at where they think the infantry is going to advance, and they're trying to create like a no man's land to deter the infantry from advancing after their artillery. And over the next few days, the artillery barrages are going to destroy the walls around the St. Myrtise Gate. And on August 31st, the infantry are called to move in. And you can imagine this scene, the Anabaptist defenders on the walls watching. And this time, this is an organized attack. This is not like the first one where you got a bunch of drunk soldiers charging the wall, mistaking sunrise for sunset. This is a coordinated assault. So you see thousands of soldiers advancing towards the gate. Must have been a pretty awesome scene. Again, the Prince Bishop's pretty confident in his attack. He's sure that the artillery barrage has struck terror into the occupants of Munster. So much terror that they're probably cowering in their homes, just waiting to be slaughtered. So he thought. Instead, what the Prince Bishop soldiers met was the resistance from desperate, motivated men and women willing to do anything to defend the city. And I just want to read an excerpt from an account of this attack, and this is a description of what happens to the Prince Bishop's soldiers. Some had their hands hacked off as they grasped the top rungs of their ladders. Some were battered through their helmets with heavy-notched clubs. Some were cloven with broadswords. Some run through with spears. So the soldiers are attempting to get through the walls into over the outer moat, through the inner wall into the city. And a few lessons ago, you might remember I mentioned that women were preparing hot tar to pour on soldiers that would scale the wall or whatever. Well, now was their time to use it, and they were pouring this hot tar on soldiers. They had quicklime, which would dissolve. It was like acid. It would dissolve your skin, quicklime. They were pouring that on the soldiers, and they were wearing thick armor. The Prince Bishop's soldiers were wearing thick armor, right? And this quicklime would seep in under the seals of the armor and start eating away at their skin. The tar would get underneath, and desperate soldiers would jump off the ladders into the moat to try to wash this quicklime off them. But once they got into the moat, they realized that they're too heavy to swim, and they would go down to the bottom, never to surface again. Many drowned that way. As this coordinated defense from the Anabaptists caught the soldiers off guard. Terror started to spread within the infantry group, and the Prince Bishop's soldiers started to retreat. And the Anabaptists had fixed men outside the walls, hiding in bushes, ready to flank the enemy if they were to retreat. And once the Prince Bishop's army starts retreating, the Anabaptists run out of the bushes, flank the enemy, and cut down many of the Prince Bishop's soldiers just from the chaos of that retreat, and the chaos and the confusion. This attack lasts longer than the first one, but the result is pretty much the same. Prince Bishop is defeated. After the attack, the Anabaptists celebrate, go back into the city, and they celebrate by singing their favorite hymn, "A Mighty Fortress Is Our God." The losses for the Prince Bishop were in the hundreds. He lost, it was like at least 100 officers alone. And officers were vital, obviously, in maintaining discipline during an attack and in garrison. So the loss of those officers were a huge hit. And then, of course, hundreds of regular soldiers were wounded and killed as well. The losses for the Anabaptists, 15 men. The last 15 men. And the Prince Bishop's soldiers, these are seasoned veterans. These aren't peasants. This is not like a peasant revolt against a peasant revolt. These are trained mercenaries who live for the art of war, being routed like this. And they were routed by simple trade masters and apprentices, right? Munster, there's not many trained warriors in Munster. These are all just normal, well, they were normal people at one point. And this shows Jan's ability to organize defenses. He was, and he did it very quickly. This wasn't a planned defense. There was a lot of last-minute decisions being made by Jan of Leiden, but he showed his ability to organize people and defend the city on this attack. And as you can imagine, Jan of Leiden's prestige skyrockets after this. And he almost is brought to the status of a god. Even before this, with the marriage decrees and the disunity that was causing, what the Prince Bishop was able to do was to hand back the unity they had before by becoming the focal point, the focal enemy for the Anabaptists. They soon forgot all the disunity that this marriage decree brought, and now they're just, again, drunk on victory, and they decide to officially crown Jan of Leiden as King of Munster. Many were saying that Jan of Leiden was King David reborn. And there's a lavish ceremony, a lavish anointing of King Jan, and where he's officially pronounced King of Munster. That's where we'll stop this week. I mentioned last week we could do this in two more. I'll need two more after this, so it'll be a total of three more. But 3 will be good. I know we can get it done in 3. And if for some reason I can combine what I want to talk about in 2, then we'll just keep it at 2 again. But most likely I'm going to need 3. But anyway, please pray with me. Father, we've talked about some difficult things this evening. Lord, I pray that what was heard is to sanctify your people, is to call out your people to be holy, to be priests, and to be shining light on the hill, the light of which shines down upon the darkness to expose darkness. Let us not be partakers in darkness. Let us not separate ourselves from what we believe and to what we do. We do because we believe, and our actions are directly influenced by us being in Christ and our sanctification. The way we vote, the way we speak with each other, the way we love each other is because we are in Christ. There is no separation of the two. Doesn't matter if I'm a one kingdom and you're a two kingdom. Our actions matter. Pray we take these things and we think about them. And we thank you for saving us, for taking us out of darkness and into the light, into the truth of your Son. And we pray that you give us boldness to speak the truth to a dark world. And we pray these things in Christ's name. Amen.